So you wanted a crash course in philosophy's greatest hits, huh? Not just the Western stuff, but the whole philosophical buffet.
That's the journey we're on today. We're talking thousands of years spanning continents, all to see how humans have wrestled with those really big questions.
Ancient Greeks, those Arabic scholars, even those super chill Chinese philosophers hanging out in bamboo forests. I know, it's a lot. But don't worry, we've got you covered.
It's like, think of philosophy as the original think outside the box subject. But it's not just dusty old books. It's about that quest to understand, like, why are we here? And they use their reason, but also, like, gut feelings, intuition.
And it's not like it is today, all separated into those neat categories. Back then, philosophy, it was all mixed up with religion, science, politics. It was how people made sense of, well, everything.
Exactly. Every good road trip needs a starting point, right? And for Western philosophy, that point is ancient Greece.
Ah, ancient Greece, yeah. Toga parties and debating if a chariot is really moving or if it's all just an illusion, right?
Well, they did love a good debate, that's for sure. But what made the ancient Greeks real trailblazers was that they dared to challenge all those traditional myths with, get this, the power of reason. Can you imagine?
So instead of saying, oh, the sun, well, that's obviously a god riding a chariot across the sky, they were like, hold on a minute. What if there's, like a natural explanation for this giant ball of fire?
Now you're getting it. And that's where those pre-Socratics come in. They were like obsessed with finding the archa, the fundamental principle, the essence of, well, everything.
I'm with you. So get this. One of them, this guy Thales, he believed that everything, and I mean everything, boiled down to water. Kind of makes you look at that bottle on your desk a little differently, huh?
It's a wild thought, for sure, but it shows just how radical their thinking was. Now, after that came Socrates, and he kind of shifted things away from the cosmos and more towards us. He was asking, how do we live a good life? How should we act?
Oh, yeah, Socrates. He was famous for those Socratic dialogues, right?
Yeah.
Always asking questions, but never giving you a straight answer. Classic.
Exactly. He'd poke holes in your arguments, make you question every single thing you thought you knew. Socrates, he truly believed that real wisdom came from within. It wasn't about just blindly accepting what everyone told you.
Pretty clever guy, but if Socrates never actually wrote anything down, how do we even know what he thought?
Good question. We have his student to thank for that. Well, actually, we have his student Plato and his, well, let's just say his mind-blowing theory of forms to thank.
Get ready, it's a wild ride.
Yeah, lay it on me. What's this theory of forms all about?
Okay, so Plato, he believed that this world, the one we see, touch, smell, all that, it's just a pale imitation. A cheap knockoff, you might say. He thought there's this higher realm where perfect, eternal versions of everything exist, and he called them forms. So imagine a triangle, like a perfect triangle. That's a form. The triangles we draw, well, those are just like shadows of the real deal.
So it's like we're all living in the Matrix, but instead of robots, it's like perfect geometric shapes controlling everything.
You got it. You're picking this up quickly. Now, of course, Plato's own student, this guy Aristotle, he wasn't entirely sold on this whole forms idea. Aristotle, he figured those forms couldn't exist, separately from the physical world.
Ah, the classic student-teacher philosophical disagreement. But you gotta admit, that debate sparked centuries of discussion, really shaped how we think about, what's real.
And here's a really interesting part. Greek philosophy. It didn't just stay in Greece. As the Roman Empire started to, grow, it absorbed all those Greek ideas, but gave them their own flavor.
So philosophy went on a little Roman holiday, huh? What happened next?
Well, that's where we start to see schools of thought popping up. Stoicism, Epicureanism, each trying to figure out, how do we live a good life? Especially with all the chaos and uncertainty of, life in the Roman Empire.
It's amazing how these philosophical ideas start to, spread and grow. But we're just getting started, right?
We're just getting started. So as that Roman Empire, starts to fade and we move into the medieval period, it's easy to think, oh, philosophy, that took a backseat to religion. But it's not that simple.
I see what you mean.
Think about it. Those incredible cathedrals, the soaring arches, the stained glass, it's all gorgeous.
Yeah.
But they weren't just expressing their faith. They were literally embodying these philosophical ideas about God, about beauty, about what it means to be human.
So philosophy was hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. Take Augustine of Hippo, for example. Now, this guy, he was wrestling with some seriously deep questions. Like, if God is all good, all powerful, how do you explain all the suffering in the world?
Yeah, that's the big one, right? The problem of evil. How do you figure that one out?
Well, he comes up with this idea of, get this, free will. Augustine, he argued that God, he gave humans this incredible ability to choose, to choose good or evil. But with choice, well, that comes with responsibility, right?
Okay, I'm following you. So instead of just being puppets, we have a say in our own destiny.
Exactly. And that was a radical idea because it meant that humans, we aren't just pawns in some cosmic game.
Yeah.
We have real agency.
Wow. So the medieval period, it wasn't all just about, chanting and incense. They were wrestling with some big ideas.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where we get to this thing called scholasticism. It was all about trying to systematize knowledge, and not just any knowledge, but knowledge about faith and reason. They wanted to bring those two together.
Scholasticism. It sounds very academic, very medieval university.
You're right. These guys, they were like the professors of their day,
Yeah.
using logic, using reason to really understand the teachings of the church. And this is where Thomas Aquinas comes in.
Okay, Thomas Aquinas, I've heard that name.
Oh, yeah. Aquinas, he was a rock star, a total master of logic, and he used it to craft these really detailed arguments, all to support, Christian beliefs.
Interesting. So they're taking those tools of logic and using them to explore their faith.
Right. But here's the really fascinating part. Even Aquinas, as smart as he was like, hold on a second. Reason can only take you so far.
You mean there's some things logic just can't explain?
Exactly. He was saying, yeah, you can use your brain to understand a lot about the world,
Uh-huh.
but there are some things, certain mysteries, that, well, you kind of need faith to really grasp.
So it's not one or the other, it's both.
Right. You need faith and reason to get the full picture.
I like that. It reminds me of that quote, the heart has its reasons which reason knows nothing of.
Exactly. And that idea that those two things aren't mutually exclusive, it still resonates today.
Yeah.
Even outside of religion.
That's so true. Okay, so we've gone from ancient Greece, where philosophy was born out of questioning those myths, to the Roman Empire, where it's all about navigating life, and now to the medieval period, where they're figuring out this dance between faith and reason. Where do we go next?
Get ready for a wild ride, because next up is the Renaissance.
The Renaissance. Bring on the art, the sculpture, the science, right?
All of that.
Yeah.
But also, imagine this. A world rediscovering the brilliance of ancient Greece. It's like all these lost texts, all these incredible ideas, they're suddenly back in circulation.
Like finding a buried treasure chest full of philosophical gold.
Yes. And it wasn't just about looking back, with nostalgia. It was about taking those ancient ideas and breathing new life into them.
So you have artists like Michelangelo, like Leonardo da Vinci. They're drawing inspiration from these ancient Greek ideals. Beauty, harmony, the human form.
Exactly. This is a full-blown cultural revolution.
Yeah.
Art, literature, philosophy, it's all connected.
A true renaissance.
Yes. But here's where it gets really, really interesting. This renewed focus on reason, on observation, it wasn't just, about pretty paintings and sculptures. It laid the groundwork for a whole new way of understanding the universe, the scientific revolution.
Whoa, okay, so now we're going from painting the Sistine Chapel to gazing at the stars through telescopes.
Exactly. Remember those Greek thinkers who dared to challenge those traditional myths? Fast forward a few centuries and boom, you've got Galileo. He's using observation, he's using reason, and he's challenging this idea that had been around for centuries, that the Earth was the center of the universe.
That's a pretty big deal. So the Renaissance, it was like this bridge between the ancient and the modern world.
You got it. It was a time of massive upheaval, of huge change. But that set the stage for even more change in the early modern period. This is when philosophy, it really takes center stage.
Oh, now you've got me on the edge of my seat. Who are these philosophical heavy hitters? Tell me more. Okay, so we've traveled through centuries of Western thought, right? From those big Greek ideas to that revolutionary spirit of the Renaissance. But this deep dive, it's about the whole philosophical world map, not just one corner of it.
You got it. Time to broaden those horizons and explore, well, the amazing worlds of Arabic, Persian, Indian, and Chinese philosophy.
I'm so ready. Let's dive right in. Arabic, Persian philosophy. What were some of those big ideas?
Well, remember how we were talking about the medieval period?
Yeah.
And how they were wrestling with this whole faith and reason thing? Well, centuries before that, you had Arabic Persian philosophers. They were already tackling that very same tension.
It's like they were ahead of the game.
Absolutely. One of the big names you got to know, Avicenna. This guy was a total rock star. I mean, to talk about a genius. He blended Islamic thought with those Greek philosophies we were talking about earlier, created this whole intricate system. And get this, It influenced scholars for centuries, both in the East and the West.
He was building bridges between cultures. That's pretty cool.
For sure. His work was crucial in bringing those Greek ideas back to Western Europe during the Middle Ages. But Arabic Persian philosophy, it wasn't just about blending traditions. They came up with their own unique, thought-provoking ideas.
Okay, like what? Give me an example.
So check this out, this idea of oneness, or tawhid. It's this belief that God, well, he's totally unique, completely beyond our puny human understanding.
Okay, yeah, trying to wrap your head around a God who's beyond comprehension. That's a lot.
It is. And it led to these really profound discussions about, like, what even is reality? What's our connection to the divine? These are questions philosophers are still grappling with today.
No kidding. So from this idea of oneness, we're shifting gears to Indian philosophy.
Get ready for a wild ride. Indian philosophy, it's like an ocean. Vast, deep, incredibly diverse.
I gotta admit, most of what I know about Indian philosophy is like yoga and meditation.
Those are definitely important parts of it, but they're just the tip of the iceberg. We're talking a tradition that goes back thousands of years.
Okay, so like Western philosophy going back to the ancient Greeks, Indian philosophy has its own roots.
Exactly. And those roots, they go deep into these ancient texts called the Vedas. They're sacred scriptures. Now, here's the thing. Within Indian philosophy, you've got all these different schools of thought. And each one has its own take on, well, everything. The nature of reality, the self, you name it.
So it's not just one monolithic thing. There's a lot of variety.
Tons. But one of the common threads you see throughout Indian philosophy, it's this deep concern with understanding suffering. Like, what is it? Why do we experience it? And how do we break free from it?
Makes sense, with all the emphasis on meditation and mindfulness, right?
Totally. And that's where the idea of karma comes in, right?
Yeah.
The idea that the choices we make, the actions we take, they have consequences that echo far beyond this life.
Okay, so it's not just about a divine being judging our actions, but this kind of cosmic law of cause and effect.
Exactly. What you sow is what you reap. And that belief in reincarnation, it's huge in Indian thought. It shapes their whole approach to ethics, to living a meaningful life.
So instead of a set of rules handed down from on high, it's more about understanding those karmic consequences. Interesting. But you mentioned there are all these different schools of thought within Indian philosophy. What's one that really stands out?
All right, so let's talk about Advaita Vedanta for a second. It's one of the most influential schools of Indian thought.
Advaita Vedanta. I'm ready.
So Advaita Vedanta, it proposes this radical form of monism. It's the idea that ultimately there's only one reality. Everything else, it's all an illusion.
Whoa. Okay, so you're saying we're all connected, part of this giant cosmic oneness, and the separations we see are all in our heads.
You're getting the idea. It's definitely a mind-bending concept. Of course, Advaita Vedanta, it's super nuanced and complex, but that core idea that our true nature is pure consciousness, that's what it's all about.
Wow, that's a pretty big shift from what we've been talking about. So from oneness in Advaita Vedanta, let's journey to, let's see, Chinese philosophy. What's in store for us there?
Get ready for a philosophy that's all about harmony, balance, living in sync with the natural order of things. They call it the Tao.
Oh yeah, the Tao. I've definitely heard of it. But to be honest, I'm a little fuzzy on what it actually means.
Okay, so picture this. The Tao is like a flowing river, always in motion, always changing, but always following its natural course.
I like that image.
Right. And Chinese philosophy, in a lot of ways, it's about aligning ourselves with that flow, both in our own lives and in our interactions with the world around us.
So kind of going with the flow of the universe.
Yes. And that's where Confucianism comes into play.
Confucius, right. One of the big names I actually recognize.
He was a rock star.
Hmm.
And he emphasized living a virtuous life. Think ritual, tradition, respecting your elders.
Honoring the past, those ancient ways.
Exactly. But Chinese philosophy is not just about following rules blindly. It's about finding that balance between honoring tradition and, trusting your gut, being spontaneous. And that's where Taoism comes in.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot, right? Balancing those seemingly opposite forces.
You got it. And Chinese philosophy, it's full of these beautiful dualities, these seeming opposites that are actually interconnected. Yin and yang, light and shadow, action and inaction.
A cosmic dance, you might say.
Perfectly said. It's about finding that harmony, that balance point within ourselves and in our relationship with the whole wide world.
Wow, what an incredible journey this has been. We started out in those ancient Greek marketplaces, and now here we are in the peaceful gardens of Chinese philosophy.
And we just skim the surface.
Yeah.
But the world of philosophy, it never ends. It's vast. It's always changing. And hopefully this deep dive has given you a little taste of just how diverse and how fascinating human thought can be.
It definitely has. Before we wrap up, any final words of wisdom for our listeners as they continue their own philosophical journeys?
Remember, philosophy, it's not about memorizing a bunch of dates or finding all the right answers. It's about keeping that curiosity alive. Question everything, challenge those assumptions, and never stop exploring.